and welcome to Eco Talk, the podcast where we explore environmental challenges and the practical solutions that can help us to create a more sustainable world. I'm Fatin, your host, and today we've gathered an amazing group of experts to dive deep into the topic of environmental pollution, specifically the three critical threats it poses and how we can address them. We will discuss the issue of improper waste management, pollution-related hazards, and climate change. And more importantly, we will explore how public awareness, better governance, and innovative approaches like climate-smart agriculture can be part of the solution. Joining me, Hikmah, a passionate sustainable advocate, me myself, an expert in sustainable agriculture, Nisa, a public health officer focused on the effect of pollution on health, Mariam, an environmental engineer, Ainul, a climate change researcher, and Daya, an educator who focuses on teaching environmental issues in schools. So let's jump right in and get started. So our first topic is improper waste management, which is one of the leading causes of environmental degradation. Hikmah, I know you have been heavily involved in community projects related to this. So what's your take on why improper waste disposal continues to be such a massive problem?
Thanks, Fatih. The root of the problem is multifaceted. On one level, is a lack of awareness. Many people don't fully understand the consequences of throwing trash on the ground and not recycling properly. There's a disconnect between their day-to-day actions and the long-term impact on the environment. For example, we have all seen pictures of plastic bags and bottles clogging rivers and ocean, but what's harder to visualize is how that waste breaks down into microplastic that then enter the food chain. It's out of sight, out of mind for many people. Then there's the issue of convenience. Even when people want to do the right things, they might not have access to recycling facilities or proper waste disposal system in their communities. So we need both public education and better infrastructure to handle waste.
I think you're spot on, Hima. And to add to that, I think we need to address the behavioral aspect too. Waste disposal is something that often gets taken for granted. People assume that once their trash is out of their house, it's no longer their problem. But the reality is the way we handle waste is everyone's responsibility. What happens when waste isn't properly managed is a ripple effect, like polluted rivers, air quality degradation, and public health risks. Communities need to be at the center of the conversation because they are the ones affected.
You bring up a point, Nisa. This idea that waste is out of sight, out of mind. Daya, as an educator, what's been your push to teaching younger generations about this disconnect?
Okay, education plays a huge role, and I think it's important to start early. I have worked on several projects in school where we try to make waste management fun and interactive for students. One of the most successful initiatives we have done was a waste audit, where students would bring in their household trash and we would sort through it together to see how much of it could have been recycled or composed. It's shocking for them to see the sheer amount of plastic that there is every day, especially single-use plastic. When kids become aware of their own waste habits, they often go home and talk to their parents about it, which is great because the learning starts to spread beyond the classroom. But I also believe it, taking it further than just schools. Public education campaigns need to be more consistent, engaging people of all ages, interactive workshops, social media campaign, and community clean-up event make the issue of waste management more visible and relatable to people.
That's great to hear, Daya. I like the idea of making waste management interactive and hands-on. But Mariam, from an engineering standpoint, how do you think we can address the larger infrastructure issues around waste? What kind of solutions should cities and governments be thinking about?
Thanks, Fatih. Personally, I think that infrastructure is missing in many places, especially in developing countries. Even in some developed countries, they are still overly reliant on landfills. not only do they take up a lot of space, but they also produce methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. What we really need is a shift towards circular economies, where waste is seen as a resource. This could mean that more recycling, of course, but also waste to energy plants, where non-recyclable waste is converted into energy instead. Another solution is also for better separation at the source. A lot of recycling system in place today fail because people aren't sorting their waste properly, or because the infrastructure doesn't support separate collection. For instance, if we could implement with widespread composting programs, organic waste could be diverted from landfills, which could significantly reduce methane emissions. And it's not just about having the technology available, it's also about making it convenient for people, as you mentioned earlier. If recycling and composting are easy, people would do it.
That's such a good point, Maria. It's reminding me of what's happening in some Scandinavian countries where recycling and composting are deeply integrated into the waste dysfunction. They have created a system where it's actually harder to throw something away than it is to recycle it. And as a result, they have some of the highest recycling rates in the world. We need to make it just as easy for people to be environmentally conscious in other parts of the world.
Mariam, you brought up an interesting point about waste to energy plants. I've seen this technology work well in certain areas, but I also have some concerns, especially from a public health perspective. In some cases, these plants can release harmful toxins into the air if they are not properly regulated. So while they can be part of the solution, we need to make sure that the technology is advanced enough to prevent further pollution.
Well, you're right to be concerned, Elsa. The technology has to be carefully implemented. Although waste to energy plants did have a reputation for emitting dangerous pollutants, but modern ones have improved significantly. They use advanced filtration systems to capture most of the harmful emissions before they reach the atmosphere. That being said, it's also important that any new facility built today adheres to the strictest environmental standard to avoid creating problems while solving the old ones.
This is such a good discussion. Balancing technology and environmental safety is crucial. I know, I'd like to bring you here. From a climate change perspective, how does improper waste management contribute to global warming? And what are your thoughts on how we can adjust it?
Thank you, Fatih. For me, improper waste management is a huge contributor to climate change, especially because of the methane emissions from landfills, as Maria mentioned. Methane is a greenhouse gas that is over 25 times more effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So, when organic waste like food scraps and yard waste decomposes anaerobically in a landfill, it's doing significant damage to the climate. On a broader scale, waste that isn't managed properly also increase the need for new raw materials to be extracted. Every time we throw something away instead of recycling or reusing it, we are contributing to the demand for more mining, logging, or oil drilling, all of which have their own environmental consequences. So, tackling waste is really a two-pronged approach, reducing emissions from waste itself and cutting down on the resource extraction that leads to further pollution. I think one of the most effective ways to address this is through policy. We need stronger regulations that encourage or even mandate recycling and composting. And beyond that, we need to move toward a zero waste economy where products are designed with their end of life in mind so they can be easily disassembled and reused. Companies need to take responsibility for the entire life cycle of their products.
I know you are absolutely right, and I want to expand on that by bringing in the agriculture angle. A lot of waste actually comes from food production and agriculture, and if you are not managing that waste properly, we are contributing to greenhouse gas emissions in a big way. This is where climate smart agriculture, which CSA, comes into play, but improving the way we manage organic waste, such as crop residues, we can turn what wild waste have been waste into a valuable resource like compost or bioenergy. So it's not just about reducing waste, but finding ways to reuse it in a way that benefits the environment. I think that's a perfect segue to the next track we will discuss, climate change. But before we dive into that, let's deal with health hazards for a moment. Nisa, I want to shift the conversation to you. We've touched on the health impacts of pollution, right? So, but can you elaborate on how pollution, particularly in urban areas, affect the public health?
Absolutely, Fatin. Pollution has a direct and serious impact on public health. I'll start with air pollution, which is one of the most widespread and harmful forms of pollution. In urban areas where there are high levels of vehicle emissions, industrial activities, and construction dust, air quality is often very poor. Breathing in polluted air over time leads to chronic respiratory issues, including asthma, bronchitis, and even lung cancer. What's more, air pollution has been linked to cardiovascular diseases like heart attacks and strokes. There's even emerging research that suggests a link between air pollution and neurodevelopmental issues in children, as well as cognitive decline in adults. It's also important to talk about water pollution. Contaminated water resources, often the result of improper waste disposal or industrial runoff, lead to waterborne diseases like cholera and dysentery, which are particularly dangerous in areas with limited access to clean water. This is a huge issue in developing countries, but still a concern in some regions of developed nations. The most frustrating thing is that many of these health problems are preventable. If we had stronger regulations on air and water pollution, along with better waste management, we could reduce the incidence of these diseases dramatically.
And it's not just about the long-term health effects either. Pollution can have immediate impacts, especially for vulnerable population like children, the elderly, and those with pre-existing conditions. For instance, during heat wave, which are becoming more frequent due to climate change, and high levels of air pollution can make the heat even more dangerous. People with asthma or heart condition are at much higher risk during these periods.
Exactly. And to make such point about water, it's not just about drinking water that is a risk. Polluted water also impacts food production. When crops are irrigated with contaminated water, harmful chemicals can end up in our food, and which then has a direct impact on human health. So there's these entire chain of events where pollution is in one area, whether it's in air, water, or soil, affects another, and eventually it comes back to public health.
And this is where the role of government and local authorities becomes so important. We need stronger monitoring systems for air and water quality, as well as strict enforcement of pollution laws. Unfortunately, many governments are either underfunded or lack the political will to take meaningful action. That's why it's crucial for the public to hold them accountable.
You all highlighted some critical points here, especially around how pollution affects health and how regulation plays a role in mitigating this impact. But let's move on to our final track about climate change, which ties everything together. Hima, you have already introduced climate smart agriculture, which is CSA. So can you explain more about how this approach works and how it helps tackle climate crisis?
Certainly, climate crisis agriculture or CSA is all about making farming more resilient to climate change while also reducing agriculture contribution to the water. Agriculture is a major source of greenhouse gas emission, particularly methane from livestock and nitrous oxide from fertilizer use. CSA aims to reduce this emission through smarter practices like agroforestry, improved livestock management, and better soil health practices.
For example, by planting trees alongside crops, farmers can sequester carbon while also improving biodiversity and soil health. Similarly, Using organic fertilizer instead of synthetic ones can reduce nitrous oxide emission, which are over 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. These practices not only help mitigate climate change but also make farms more resilient to extreme weather events, which are becoming more common due to global warming.
That's right, Daya. And from a climate change perspective, CSA is one of the most promising solutions we have, especially when you consider that agriculture accounts for about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. What's exciting about CSA is that it's not just about reducing emissions, but also about adapting to the changing climate. Drought-resistant crops, for example, are a key part of CSA because they require less water, which is crucial as we see more frequent and severe droughts around the world.
I know, you are touching on something important. CSA isn't just a technical solution, it's also a social one. A big part of the success of CSA will come down to educating farmers about this technique and making sure they have the resource to implement them. Farmers are often the first to feel the effects of climate change, but they are also some of the most innovative problem solvers out there. We need to give them the tools and knowledge to make these practices work.
Well, education is key, but so is funding. A lot of these innovations, like precision agricultural technology, come with a high upfront cost. Governments, NGOs, and international organizations need to step up and provide financial support to farmers, especially smallholders, to help them adopt CSA practices. If we only leave up to the farmers to bear all the costs, we're not going to see the widespread adoption that's needed to make a real impact towards having a more sustainable pollution and environment.
And we can't forget the health benefits of CSA. By reducing the use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, we can also reduce the health risks associated with chemical exposure for both farmers and consumers. Cleaner agriculture means cleaner food and water, which in turn means healthier communities.
Absolutely, Lisa. And there's also a role for consumer needs. If we want farmers to adopt more sustainable practices, we need to create a demand sustainably for this food. This means educating the public about the environmental and health impact of their food choice. When consumers start demanding more eco-friendly options, the market will follow and then can drive more widespread adoption of CSA.
Wow, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. Before we wrap up, I'd like to go around the panel one more time for your final thoughts. What do you think is the most important action we need to take right now to address these three threats, like improper waste management, health hazards from pollution, and climate change?
Okay, I think it all starts with public awareness. We need to make these issues personal for people. When individuals understand how their actions affect the environment and their health, they are more likely to change their behavior.
I agree with you, Mark, but I'd add that public awareness isn't enough without enforcement. Governments need to step up and implement stronger regulations to protect public health and the environment because accountability is the key.
Well, for me, it's all about infrastructure investment. We need systems in a place that make it easy for people to manage waste properly. And we also need modern technologies to handle pollutions to reduce the emissions.
Well, in my opinion, I think the most urgent action is addressing climate change through systemic approaches like CSA. We're running out of time, and agriculture is a huge piece of the puzzle. We need to scale up these practices globally to make a real difference.
I agree with that. Supporting farmers with education, resources, and funding is crucial if we want to see a shift towards sustainable, climate-smart farming.
And I would say education at all levels, from schools to community programs. The more people understand this issue, the more likely they are to push for change, whether it's in their personal life or through political advocacy.
Wow, thank you everyone for all your incredible thoughts. This has been an enlightening discussion on the urgent threats pose for environmental pollution and the innovative solution that we can implement to solve them. To our listeners, remember, change starts with awareness, but it requires action at the level, individual, community, and governmental. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep pushing for a healthier planet. Thank you for tuning into Ikatalk.